All right, everyone, we are live. It's BRAP Rant on a Sunday night. I haven't done a Sunday night BRAP Rant in a long time. Hold on just a sec here. Got to adjust my audio settings here so I'm not like yelling in people's ears. But yeah, wanted to do an impromptu rant. An impromptu rant to kind of just discuss kind of what's going on over at Xbox because and look, before anyone gets upset over the title, it's the title to draw attention. That's all. But no, we're gonna have a really good conversation about what's going on at Xbox because I think there's some fair criticism here to be had with the more recent delays with Starfield and Redfall. And I brought back Game Logic to discuss some of these delays. Because I think Game Logic, you have a very unique perspective. I think many of us don't have, as you have. To rant. What's the word I'm looking for? As you have, done work in software development and, understand. I think I always hear you say P&Ls. No, welcome back, man.
Well, thanks a lot, man. I certainly appreciate it. And thank you for the compliments, and I will do my best to be as helpful as I can.
Yeah, because, you mentioned P&L a lot, but I think that's something like a lot of us don't think of because a lot of us haven't really had to deal with P&Ls per se. Like I've scratched the surface of P&Ls in some of the work I used to do previously, but I think you definitely have a better understanding of that and how that impacts decision making and development and things like that. So, all right. So we we talked about this on Crossfire on Friday night on Mooch's channel, and there was a lot of people there, so there's certainly a lot of opinions, and I got to say, like so I guess for me, there's a couple things that I'm seeing here. I'm seeing, I for the most part, from what I've seen and what I've heard, I think there's been some fairly good constructive criticism about, Microsoft and, the lack of maybe new first party content for 2022, which is kind of interesting when you think that, this is year 2 of the Xbox Series consoles, and yes, I understand they released Halo Infinite and Forza last year, but I think that when you think about Game Pass, you think about how they positioned or spoke about Game Pass, and the quote unquote, you've talked a lot about this, Game Logic, the day and date stuff. It's kind of it's a little, I guess, head scratching in the sense that, you would have assumed, Game Pass was launched in 2017. They started acquisitions back then. That there'd be some kind of pipeline here, right? There'd be almost like a backup plan, like where, if games are delayed, because delays are going to happen. We know that. I think everyone would agree that it happens to everyone in the industry. Not just Microsoft, but what's interesting here is that there isn't anything necessarily to soften that blow, which raises the question. And I said this on Crossfire on Friday. I said we're having the same conversation about Microsoft, Xbox, as we have been for the last 6 years, despite these studio acquisitions, despite them pivoting towards Game Pass, and despite them saying, hey, our games are going to be day and date. The day and day stuff has been kind of far few in between, in my opinion, and to the point where I've last used Game Pass back in November, only to play the Halo Infinite campaign. So I understand Forza came out, Forza Horizon 5, but that's not a game that I play. So I'm only speaking from my usage of Game Pass. But so Logic, what do you I think you've brought out some really great points with as relates to some of the delays here. What do you think's going on at Xbox? I mean, I'm not going to go as far. A lot of people have been blaming Phil. I'm not going to say it's necessarily all his fault, but what are your thoughts about about these delays and what Microsoft has been doing the last 4 or 5 years?
So, trying to figure out a good place to start, because this is always, a slippery slope to land on. So maybe I'll start a little bit with my own perspective on kind of what my own expectations were before I step over into what might be going on over there, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
So I kind of mentioned it, I think, on your show last week. I guess the first thing for me and kind of formulating my own perception on this is what were my own expectations, and kind of what I mentioned was, look, in the Xbox One era, we got past the dawn, and this is the Xbox One era coming off of the Xbox 360 era, which I would say was kind of a golden time for Xbox. First two generations went well, and I was happy as a consumer of the Xbox product and ecosystem and suite of entertainment and media content. So we go into the Xbox One era, and they unfortunately had Don Matrick at the helm for whatever reason. And Matrick had a really difficult time conveying to consumers what the value proposition of the Xbox One was, and kind of repeated the same errors that the PlayStation Corporation had repeated when they were, doing their bit for the PlayStation 3 before it launched in his own unique way. But clearly conveyed that he didn't really have the voice of the consumer, right? Wasn't really what was kind of voicing in his head. So we went through the start of the Xbox One era, and things started kind of appearing problematic, and we got into the back half of the Xbox One era, and during that time, as I felt things were pointing south. Phil came out and rolled out Game Pass, right, in 2017. And then the first studio acquisitions took place in 2018. And my interpretation of kind of where we were in the life cycle of the Xbox was like, look, I think there's been an admission that this generation is kind of over and this kind of competitive fight has been lost. But what that corporation is going to focus on is they're going to focus on backwards compatibility. They've shifted to Game Pass. They're going to put a lot of value out there for people who want to consume that content. And then the studio acquisitions came, and I said, oh, here's the drumbeat and the ramp up that I hear to next generation, right? This is, hey, we've made some missteps, and this is Phil's own words at the time, admitting that they had lost focus on first party content. Mm-hmm. And so the replacement for that, the gimme for that, the olive branch for that was to start doing these things that I think did voice the customer's concerns, and start putting Lego blocks in place for what was going to formulate the foundation for the next generation. And it was kind of that, we talk about football teams, baseball teams, basketball teams, about this rebuilding year. And I kind of felt like, 2017 up until the launch were kind of the rebuilding years, and I was fine with that, right? If you were an Xbox One owner, you could have arguably kind of sat back and been okay with getting content in Game Pass and the remaining first-party titles, and kind of seeing the wind up to what was going to go into next generation. And being a multi-platform gamer at the time, I was fine with it. I didn't feel the need to abandon the Xbox platform. I was fine to wait because I had other things to kind of fill my time. And so when we look at today, 5 years later, and we go, if that was the coil up, right? If they were planting the springboard, my expectation as a consumer was just that by 2022, some of those things would have come to fruition. And then I flip over to kind of the business aspect of it, and kind of what the experiences that have painted my own kind of business perspective. And from my own business perspective, this is a thing that sometimes I have done, again, not on this scale, but this is a thing where when I have gone out and sought and tried to put, I was having a talk with a customer about this last week about kind of the way she wanted to proceed. And I was like, hey, when potential crisis and risk rears its head, my first choice is always going to be control, right? I want as many of the resources that I'm dependent upon to manage the risk and be successful under my control. I have a lack of faith in proceeding forward with dependencies on other people and other organizations and other business units that may not necessarily have my priorities in mind. And when I have to move quickly and I have to solve crises quickly, I just don't want to have to do the mother may I and the back and forth and the negotiation and collaboration when I can just put things into motion. And so when I look at the Xbox division, what I look at is like, this is not the way that business segment has been organized within Microsoft, right? When Phil Spencer first initially kind of came to power, for lack of a better term, he did not have all these tools at his fingertips, right? He wasn't in control of DirectX. He wasn't in control of the hardware. Xbox Game Studios was something separate. The Windows Group, right, was their own thing. And he also started kind of this rise to power at a time when Microsoft was doing stacked rankings. I don't know that they don't do stacked rankings anymore, but they were doing stacked rankings, and where there was pretty much direct competition between divisions and reporting segments within Microsoft. This was before Satya came to power, and before there was this whole, one Microsoft movement, right? And so kind of what I've observed and what I've approved of and what I've kind of built my expectations around were, hey, we're going to take all of this gaming stuff and organize it and orient it under one leader and one leadership and one organizational framework. And my expectation, based on my own business experience, has just been, I expect that organization to now be able to render things by leveraging an incredible amount of power, right? Of coordination, of being able to drive what the byproduct of the Windows operating system that the Xbox runs on, right? To get the DirectX group to do the things, right? The velocity architecture, right? To do the things that the console needs, and not just to take it as a byproduct. And so I was kind of expecting that by now we would be driving in a direction and not necessarily kind of, I guess, meandering about, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. No, I would agree with you 100%. Like there was a period where and again, I'm going to equate it to sports. Like, with, like let's say the Washington Commanders right now. Well, maybe they're not a good example. I'm not going to use sports. I was going to use the Commanders, but I'll use the Commanders for as another example further down the line of the podcast. But no, but like, yeah, I mean, I agree. Like the Xbox One, we know about the issues that console had, but you're right. Like when they introduced Game Pass, it was like, wow, okay, like this is cool, right? It made me really excited, especially when they said first party games day and date. I thought to myself, wow, that's awesome. No one else is doing that, right? And hell yeah, I'm gonna subscribe to Game Pass because I'm gonna get AAA games day and date. I'm not gonna have to pay $60 for them at the time. $60 for these games. There's going to be other content that's going to be dropping in there. And I thought that, and then, the studio acquisitions, and I'm thinking, okay, this is, what was it? I forget their first studio acquisition. Was it like 2018? I don't remember.
It was E3 2018 was when they first made the announcement. And I think the ones that they brought on board then were, and I am bad about having all the names of all the studios memorized. I kind of orient, my recollection of it around what
started the initiative, and then started, they bought Compulsion Games.
And they got Tim Schafer's company, and they brought on Obsidian. And I want to say the acquisition for Playground Studios. Right, the things that got me excited was them getting Playground Studios, because I was a big Forza fan. I wasn't necessarily super excited about the whole Tim Schafer acquisition, but it was interesting, right? And then I was super excited about them bringing on Obsidian. And then I guess the guys who do Senua's Sacrifice were also acquired in that initial announcement.
What's it called? Ninja Theory, yeah. So, but I was thinking, like, these acquisitions, and Obsidian did release Outer Worlds, which was actually a pretty good game. I think they did Bethesda games better than Bethesda does, but it's another conversation. Or those Bethesda style games, open world games. But anyhow, but I started getting like this because I remember when Outer Worlds released. I'm like, oh, this came on Game Pass. It was a really good game, right? I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, I got this in Game Pass, right? And so my expectation, and to me, like when I would hear Phil speak, and he would talk about like they want to make, gamers at the center of the experience, and they're gonna, they're investing in the platform and all this stuff, and it sounded great. I'm like, oh, they're building out this platform to give us this great like drip feed of content, and again, day and date. That's the reason why I subscribe to it. And then I'm thinking 4 or 5 years into it, I'm thinking, geez, by the launch of the Series X, Series S. Maybe not the launch, but maybe maybe they might have a game like, at launch. It's, a must have, right? That killer app that people talk about. They didn't have that, and then we start seeing, the development challenges with Halo Infinite, which is still a head scratch for me because I'm like, this is your most iconic franchise. Why is it, again, I don't know all the development issues. I'm not a developer, but I've heard a lot of the challenges at that studio. And it's just, it seemed like a lot of it was mismanagement and, just a turnstile of employees. And it's like, where's the oversight? This is your baby. This is what puts you on the map. And even though Game Logic, you and I are still playing Halo Infinite multiplayer, it's not without its issues, right? But so for me, like considering like that turn that them kind of pivoting and acquiring studios and putting together, which I think is a great value proposition in Game Pass. For me to see us in 2022 having the same conversation we've been having with them or about them for 6 years is puzzling.
Right, and I want to maybe try and start talking through a little bit of the where I'm not, or where we're not like in the same place as some of the discussions, right? So I don't know if it's still going on now, but at one point when I initially logged into Twitter, I saw Phil Spencer was trending on Twitter, right? So this is, I don't think anywhere in my dialogue, at least, I have mentioned or campaigned for the removal of Phil Spencer.
No, I think that, and by the way, I don't agree with that. Phil is, look, I don't think he's solely responsible for everything, right? I think he's done some really good things, but yeah, I'm not on that bandwagon.
Right, but at the end of the day, this is a ship under his command, and right, if there's a perception that there's a drop off in delivery of what people are looking for, then at the end of the day, he is responsible. I don't, again, I'm not gonna talk about him being removed, but I don't have any problem commenting that there's a miss somewhere in here, right? Just in terms of the expectations that I had of what was going to be delivered. Now, I've seen other people say that, well, I expect, a AAA banger every month. I personally think that's a little ridiculous, particularly from first-party studios. But whatever the cadence becomes, right? Let's just talk about those initial studios. I think there were 5 or 6, right, in the acquisition in 2018. It's 4 years later. It's the first 2 years of the console. Not all of those studios have delivered content in a way that reinforces the value proposition of Game Pass. And I don't know that it would be unreasonable to kind of expect that as a minimum. And that's just let's just call that an enumeration. Let's not even necessarily say that, it's those 5 or 6 specific studios, right? But just in terms of, 2 years, 24 months, what has been the total amount of kind of first party content that's been delivered? Now, I will also say, I'm not personally a first party person. I play mostly on PC. There is no such thing as first party. Corsair, EVGA, NVIDIA, and AMD don't make video games, right? So I've never fully understood the whole focus on first party. But as someone who participates in running a business and someone who, again, listens to the voice of the customer, I would have to have an understanding that is a priority for some part of the market segment that they're trying to address. And so that part of the market segment appears to be unfulfilled. And so, even if Twitter is a small percentage, you still have a certain reliance on, and again, I don't take this but so far, but there's still a certain reliance on people who are swimming in the deep end of the pool with their expectations kind of being supportive, right, in voicing your brand. And again, I don't want to put an overemphasis on influencers, but you know, in my life, I'm a person who a lot of people come to and ask, hey, what should I buy? What's interesting? What are the pros and the cons? And so right now, if 5 people planning on buying consoles came to me and asked for my recommendation or what my thoughts on were on Xbox versus PlayStation or Xbox versus Nintendo, I wouldn't necessarily, convey to them a story that would talk about a lot of content being delivered in a deterministic fashion, right, over the next few years. Somebody would come to me and they would say, hey, I hear Xbox has this thing called Game Pass. I'm kind of interested because I'm going to, buy a Series S for little Johnny, or I'm going to buy a Series X for myself. And I don't really keep up with all the gaming news and I don't really care. I just want to go in and pay for this warehouse of games. But I am a little concerned about, these types of games or this, and I'm like, that content's there. It's certainly, not a horrible value proposition if you don't think, $10 or $15 a month is too much to pay in comparison to other subscription services, which have kind of settled out around $10 per month. I said, but I can't really give you guarantees of what's going to show up there. It's kind of haphazard and it's kind of random right now. So my advice might be, if you're insistent on going with an Xbox, maybe you try out the Game Pass thing for 3 months. And if you're not getting what you need, maybe you put that on pause, right? And then just go, buy your games. I don't really know. But if that person were asking me Xbox versus PlayStation, I could probably convey to them a better story about what expectations they should have about PlayStation. And again, that's because I'm a vendor agnostic person. I don't really care about how many Xboxes there are versus PlayStation. It's just when people come to me and ask me things like that, I try and find out first what their requirements are, what their expectations are, and then I try to give them advice that I think will meet their requirements. And I don't know what set of requirements somebody would come to me and ask to be fulfilled where I would recommend them an Xbox, other than, quite frankly, and I'm not saying this to be a combative statement, other than it was, hey, I just want a console and I don't really care what content is there, right? I mean, that's pretty much, the systems engineering requirement that I could allocate to the Xbox, just because I don't know a better story than that right now. And a lot of this has to do with, I don't know, right? A lot of the opinions that are out there that find people who are calling this stuff into question, like you and I are, to be annoying and irritating to them. And they're like, I have plenty of games. I'm okay. I'm not really worried. I'll just look at the slate for June through the rest of the year. Soldiers, Spellforce 3, The Quarry, Shadowrun Trilogy, Deliver Us the Moon, Sonic Origins, Capcom Fighting Collection, Madison, MX versus ATV, Legends. I think that's the first release in June that I actually recognize what that game is. Outworlds, World Slayer. I mean, it's a bunch of stuff that, at least I would say, has not been marketed with any particular specificity right now. A lot of series that I don't know about, and a lot of franchises that, at face value, I don't know that I would care about. There's a Digimon title. 2 Point Campus coming in August. Saints Row is probably the biggest thing that I've come across so far. And I don't have anticipations that Saints Row is going to be it's not going to be a God of War, right? I mean, it's going to be the thing that's out there. It's probably going to be about like a Guardians of the Galaxy. And if that's fine for you, I think that's the first big recognizable title of the things that I've run down that come out in August. Mm-hmm. Steel Rising, there's a Warhammer title in September that I think is a turn-based title. So that, I don't view those things as playing particularly well. There's Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown, which I would need to dig into. I like the TDU franchise, but that Solar Crown thing on the button, I'm like, I don't know what that is. I need to make sure that's not some weird mobile title being ported over. And Gotham Knights. Hello Neighbor 2 and Stalker. And I don't have a high confidence for Stalker because those developers are in Ukraine. So, I mean, out of that whole slate of what's remaining to come out in 2022 that's going to land on Xbox, that is a recognizable title, you've got Saints Row and what was the one? And Gotham Knights. right? And Gotham Knights, I would say, is kind of questionable right now because WB games have a strong tendency to be delayed. So you've got Saints Row, and I mean, if that's your outlook and you're fine with that, and you're like, hey, I just want a bunch of titles being put into my subscription service, and I don't really have a care for like what they are. Well, first of all, you're complimenting this whole notion that I don't really agree with, but you know that there's a campaign out there that says quality over quantity, right? And talks about games in Game Pass not being of a very appealing value. So you're kind of reinforcing that when you kind of say you don't care. But, you know, at the end of the day, I don't see a lot that's enticing that would get me excited about being on the Xbox platform for the remainder of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way you do. And the other part for me too is just as a consumer again, you know, I see some of the live chats says that they're tired of console warring. But we're not. This isn't console warring. We're speaking as consumers. You know, the one thing that for me too, when I think about the announcement of Game Pass, and then the now, admittedly, I bought the Series X. My kids wanted a new Xbox, and so I got it for them. I mean, I think at that point, Logic, I was already on PC. I was, on the 2070 at that point, and once Game Pass was announced for PC, and I was like that just kind of solidified things for me. But even then, on the PC side, like I'm actually spending more time in Steam than I am Game Pass, right? Like I wouldn't even launch Halo Infinite multiplayer from Game Pass anymore because it tends to crash more than the Steam version. But one of the things that kind of intrigued me about the Series X, and it makes me think about the pre-Don Matrick era, and I think about the original Xbox and Microsoft touting it as the most powerful console at the time. They really backed that up, I thought, with putting out games that really visually, I guess, did things that were impressive, like Halo, visually impressive game. I don't know if you ever played Ninja Gaiden on the OG Xbox, or Panzer Dragoon. Yep. I mean, those games were visually just great, right? Splinter Cell comes to mind. I haven't seen that with the Series X. And that's one of the things that's kind of stood out to me, is that old Microsoft 20 years ago with the OG Xbox was touting these things, touting the hard drive, the fact that you could rip games onto remember you could rip music onto the hard drive of the OG Xbox, and then use that and create your own like customized soundtrack for games. Like now, the developer would have to allow that, but there were a couple games. I remember Grand Theft Auto San Andreas is one of them. I'll never forget, I made a Cypress Hill and NWA remix or something, and I had that playing while I was playing San Andreas, right? And that was something that you could do in that game that you couldn't do on the PlayStation. But I do feel with the Series X, all the chatter of the 12 teraflops and velocity architecture and all these things and why they sound cool. I got to be honest with you, Game Logic, I haven't seen anything that makes me say, wow, yeah, okay, I get it now. I see it. I saw those things 20 years ago when they talked about the fact that the original Xbox had a built-in internal hard drive and what developers could do with that. And you had more, you had Morrowind, the Elder Scrolls Morrowind come out on that console. And that was really, I mean, that couldn't be done anywhere else. Right? I don't see that with the Series X. And then on top of that, I'm not seeing that day and date or that regular cadence of releases that I'd like to see in Game Pass as well. And I'm wondering, there's part of me, and this is crazy. This goes back to, and I said this jokingly on Friday, hopes and dreams. We've been saying for 6 years, but I'm kind of still latching on to that hope. Like, well, wait a minute, they did acquire, or they're about to acquire Activision Blizzard. Maybe things get better, but I'm not so sure things are going to get better even with that acquisition. And I'm not so sure things are going to get better with managing all those studios, because we've seen some issues that there's going to be some studios that don't need, I guess, quote unquote, hand holding. I don't have any, I think Obsidian will be fine. I think the Coalition will be fine. I think Turn 10 will be fine. The Playground will be fine. Ninja Theory, but But then to me, there's just more questions right now of how are they going to manage all these studios? It's never been done before, right? We had Agent Deleon, who used to work for we had Agent Deleon, who used to work for Ubisoft. He said one of the challenges Ubisoft had was managing all of their studios, across different parts of the world. So my question is how are they going to do that? And I wonder if they're going to be able to do it. I'm not saying they can't. I'm just wondering, considering where we are today, how they manage all those things, how they manage that pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question on consumer products and consumer product recommendations is always, in the for the electronics industry, particularly in this day where capability and content gets delivered so voraciously, in a digital format, is you're always buying on potential. One of the things that was very satisfying to me with when I bought the Xbox 360, despite me at the end of the day getting 5 red rings of death, there's the fact that the Xbox 360 grew as a product. Even when I got off of that system, 5 years into its life cycle, that Xbox 360 had grown from what it was when I bought it, right? And even though I didn't own it, the platform continued to grow. I would even argue during the Xbox One era, right, there was still kind of platform growth and service growth. And I've always, I will definitely always throw my hat in the direction of Xbox, as a platform and a services company. And I've always been, not taking this weekend's outage, right, into consideration. I've actually seen some trails where, as I suspected, that looks like it's more of a software bug that had a very large footprint, but at the end of the day was a defect and not a service outage. But have always had much more confidence in Xbox delivering services and as a platform. Where when those are things that I value and take into consideration, again, kind of given what I do for a living. So I've always considered Xbox a plus for that, and I've always had confidence in them for that, and I've always recognized that as a potential. I've always even felt that multiplayer was a more robust ecosystem on the Xbox than the PlayStation.
Yeah,
coming from the days when like the PlayStation 3 didn't have a pack-in headset, and every time I jumped online, there would be like complete silence because nobody was online except like one person. Just because what the effect of that not putting a pack-in headset in is it started a culture that wasn't as advanced as the Xbox Live culture, right? In just terms of online communications and the frequency and the prevalence of it, So, with all of these products, it's always a question of, well, what's coming down the pike, what's going on, what do you have to look forward to? And that's what I'm trying to get my hands around. Froggy T. Wright in the chat says, totally glossing over 2 years of COVID. Again, I'm not Froggy. First of all, I work in the software development industry, and I've lived through the 2 years of COVID. And I would even go further to say my own people and myself are far more directly impacted because we have work that we can only physically do on site, right? We have things that we touch that cannot be touched remotely. So I'll say, just as a for instance, I would say, don't you dare throw that at me that I'm totally glossing over 2 years of COVID, because, being somebody who has teams working at half a dozen different sites in my geographic area who I all have to go spend time in with them and their customers, that impact is not lost. However, for a company who has development activity that doesn't have that burden, that was definitely a negative impact. However, it is an impact that can have been surmounted and that there should be some give for. What I'm saying is that after 5 years of time with all of the tools that have been put in that bucket and all the resources that have been put in that bucket, there should be a projection of what's expected. I would even give you so far as to say out into 2023. So even if I lengthen your target lead time for an additional year, what I'm saying right now is, as a consumer, I don't know that in 2023, because I haven't seen a roadmap and I haven't seen a release schedule and I haven't seen an indication of product delivery, other than the things that have been delayed, the 2 titles, I don't know what 2023 looks like if you're a Game Pass subscriber in any other way than to give a very hand-wavy right, kind of projection that, well, there are going to be games delivered there. And all I'm saying is that for some people that will be enough and that will be fine. For other people, it won't.
Yeah. I mean, and for me, it's not enough for me to say, okay, well, I'm going to assume that 2023, 2024 is going to be huge because they have all these studio acquisitions and giving development time frame. We're going to see those games, but we don't know that though. None of those games have been announced yet, right? I feel a little more comfortable with Nintendo and Sony's roadmap. I feel like they've actually shown me things that, okay, wait a minute. I know these, they're working on games that are coming out. We know about God of War Ragnarok. Nintendo, and I don't remember, Nintendo's got some games that are coming out. I think this year as well. Jeff Grubb mentioned that. Actually, Jeff Grubb corrected me on the Crossfire chat that there are some things coming out for even Nintendo this year. But again, I think the point of all this too is that it just, at least for me, it seems odd that here we are 6 years, after we started having this conversation of where the games are. That's still the case. And look, I get, like, if some people are okay waiting, that's fine. Me as a consumer, though, I'm not okay waiting because I have this service I'm not utilizing, and I know people are going to be like, oh, we'll cancel the service. Well, yeah, I would. But, BRAP is going to, I'm a consumer. I'm going to stack deals when I can get them, right? So, and that's what I've done, but I'm not using it. And go ahead, man.
Well, and let me swing back to Froggy's question. I'm not angry with you, Froggy, but your comment definitely has me charged up, right? Because this is what's been going on a lot over the last few days, is that if you have a criticism, right, or a lack of certainty, and let me super laser focus on that last piece, right? Consumer enthusiasm, consumer excitement gets eroded when there is a lack of certainty, right? And so going back to the comment is, it's, people have been picking, you cite these concerns, right, over Xbox, or you indicate where you have a feeling that there's a thing lacking, right, in the messaging and the horizon and the expectation and what you're supposed to be excited about. And people like to cherry pick these little, like, singular factors right out of what you're conveying. And what I'll say is, like, we're not in a courtroom, right? It's not up to me to establish beyond a reasonable doubt, right? I'm not the person out there selling Xboxes. I don't care. But what I can indicate is what my own perspectives are on what a consumer product is supposed to fulfill, what the promise of it is. And so cherry picking little things like totally glossing over 2 years of COVID, could you lead what Phil Spencer leads, right? The pandemic has had an effect. What I'll say is I don't care, right? I'm not trying to sell Xboxes, right? That's not my job. My job isn't to solve this problem. And just so we're clear, I've written 2-3 plans, right, more times over on things that could be done to solve this problem, just as a kind of an academic case study, or at least approaches to it, as well as the Halo Infinite problem, right? If you want to go pick those things apart, go pick those things apart. What I'm indicating and what I'm conveying is that there's a lack of certainty, and that equates to a lack of confidence. And when people are not confident about a product, that will cause a problem in them making the decision to go buy it, right? People are not encouraged to go buy products that they have questions about how they're going to perform, right, over the next 2 or 3 years. And the single thing that I think people can stand on, right, if we're going to make it an argument for everything's okay, right, you don't have to ask questions about Xbox. Those people are people who have already made a brand-oriented decision that they're in that camp and they're staying in it, and nothing that you say to them is going to cause them to change their mind. And I don't necessarily know that that's the question, right? The question is about people who are onboarding, which is a springboard point for Game Pass subscriptions, and how many people are going to come into the ecosystem. And one of the things that I mentioned today was somebody was saying, slow and steady wins the race. I'm like, there's a linear discussion to be had here, right, when all velocities are equal. And that's, hey, if I miss out on 2 million Xboxes sold this year and PlayStation sells 4 million, right, it's okay because I can sell 4 million next year. Or if PlayStation sells 4 million this year and sells 2 million next year, it's okay because I can sell 6 million next year. that's a linear, steady state, all velocities equal argument. One of the things that I brought up is that there's an opportunity cost here, and that confidence being eroded, and it starts a velocity tail chase that you're never going to recover from. And so, right, the potential risk for them, again, now flipping over to a business assessment side, is that they're going to wind up kind of in the same place that they were last generation, right, being in third place. And maybe that's okay. You know, my big concern from a consumer aspect, as I mentioned on BRAP show last Wednesday, is I just want them all to be, I just want the three of them to be in position where all three vendors are encouraged to compete and to compete differently and offer differentiated products on the market. Because at the end of the day, that's what's the best for all of us consumers.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. You know, there's all three of them offering, you know, things that are a little bit slightly different from the others. But one thing that I often get when people hear me talk about Xbox and Gaming Addict from the ILP brought this up. He's like, why do you buy Xbox then if you've been talking this stuff for years? Look, I've owned an Xbox console for the last 20 years. And look, I'm a hardcore gamer, and I buy everything. And you know, I bought a Series X. Well, one, I bought the Series X. My kids really wanted it, but I have it too because look, you know, if there's an Xbox game that you know, that I want to play on my 65-inch OLED, I want to have the best experience possible outside of PC. It's going to be on the Series X. But I don't think that means that you can't be critical of something that you've purchased only because you purchased it. Like, I don't subscribe to that notion either, Addict, that because you bought something or because, you know, this conversation has been happening for, you know, 6 years. You got to remember, part of the promise or part of the thing that Microsoft did very well, I thought, coming out of the Xbox One was actually that pivot with Game Pass and then talking about this 12 teraflop beast. And it did seem that conversation. And Attic, I think you're probably too young to remember the OG Xbox, but that conversation piece reminded me of the OG Xbox days when Ed Freeze, Jay Allard, Robbie Bach were out there talking about the Xbox in ways that I haven't seen Microsoft talk about an Xbox console in quite some time, and they just haven't delivered the goods just yet. And maybe they do, and they do great. But I think that's fair criticism. You can, if you have bought something. Maybe it's buyer's remorse. If you bought something, that yeah, you can absolutely be critical about if they're not, if that thing that you bought's not meeting the needs that you have as a consumer.
Right, and all these things are going to be a matter of perspective. Like if you look, if all you've been around for, right, is Xbox One and Xbox Series, and you're like, hey, okay, this isn't that big deal. I'm going to stay on the Xbox Series train. That's fine for you, right? If you have the perspective of having been on original Xbox 360, seeing the drop off in Xbox One, and then having the perspective that, oh, I see the coil up and the potential that they're going to turn things around for Xbox Series, and now you're 2 years into Xbox Series, going into the third holiday for Xbox Series, which I've mentioned before. Again, if you've had the perspective of being able to see every console generation, right, since the beginning of time, how it pans out. Year 3, holiday season 3, is a very critical time, right? And that platform right now is heading into that critical point where there's not a recovery, there's not a return to green. And so if they pass,
and real quick, Game Logic, like that is also, that's a great point because I think like you and I have a different perspective than some other people who haven't, like, I've been gaming for 40 years, you know? So, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think that there's certainly a different perspective that someone might have when you've been gaming that long. You've kind of seen these things kind of pan out. But I'm sorry, go ahead, man.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and I totally, you know, you and I talk, I mean, basically every day about how there's different market demographics, right? And so certainly everybody's going to have a different perspective, right? And I'm probably negative on people who have a younger perspective because sometimes they say, hey, why are you guys complaining? This isn't that big a deal. And I'm like, yeah, you've been gaming for 5 years. You don't understand all the history. Or even our peers who have been gaming for a long time, but so rapidly forget the history, right? I mean, I constantly have to feel like it's kind of ridiculous that I constantly have to bring up things that have been happening since 2000, how we didn't get to monetization the way we are now through no reason, that we didn't get through like Game Pass and some of these business propositions, right, as we are with no reason, that there's been an evolution, right? We didn't We didn't get to, them wanting to put advertisements in games for no reason. There's been an evolution across the industry of events and happenings and business pivots since, for the last 22 years that people just forget and don't pay attention to. So it's going to be framed by perspective. And again, I'll always go back to, and this is one of the critical things in the decomposition of this dialogue that has been going on Twitter and other social media too, where look, if you're fine with everything that's going on, great, right? Stick with the Xbox platform, sail on into 2023, and hopefully I'm praying for you that things are going to turn around and deliver you what you need. And if nothing ever shows up, then maybe that doesn't bother you, right? But another thing that I feel like is kind of harmful to the gaming dialogue is this notion of like, I'm going to be mad at you because you're mad, right? First of all, I'm not mad. I'm not angry. I've studied the industry for 40 plus years. I've written about the industry for 20 plus years. And that conjoined with what I do professionally, right, just creates an area of discussion that I like to have and participate in. Anyone casting aspersions that like this is not something to be discussed or like, why are you talking about this? I'm like, look, nobody forced you to tune into this podcast. Nobody forced you to follow my Twitter account. Nobody, like, it came across your timeline and you chose to engage in the conversation, right? That's on you. So I just don't really, understand it. This whole thing of like, I'm going to be angry at you because you have an opinion that doesn't paint, rosy tinted glasses or whatever, and doesn't say, don't worry, be happy and everything's fine. The kids are okay, Yeah,
no. Yeah, no, that's a great point, Game Logic. Now I'll say this. I mean, I'm not going to say it's all doom and gloom because I do think that, again, my expectation with the amount of studios they have at this point, that they should be able to crank out. And again, I don't think they're going to have a AAA release every month, but I got to believe there's going to be a regular cadence at some point, right? Go ahead, man.
Or at least, and I think what we're getting around to, I'll just interject this, right? The people who are in this chat and the people who have been out on Twitter who say, again, don't worry, be happy, everything. So I'm like, look, again, when I go back to that, uncertainty, lack of confidence, I'm like, just, what I will say is what Xbox has been doing for the last few years has been innovative in terms of market strategy and like where they're heading. And I think the thing that needs to go along with that is something, I won't go as far as to say, you need to put a whole roadmap out there and show us like all the titles that you anticipate coming. You need to tell us everything that's in pipeline. But to me, you have to do something to restore that confidence. And so like there has to be messaging and there needs to be telegraphing of kind of an expectation and an understanding of kind of what you mentioned, what the release cadence is. Again, I probably would also, as I think about it in detail, wouldn't recommend going down the path of trying to be hyper specific about the exact titles, right? But it's got to be something. It can't just be, in my mind, from my perspective, I'm not satisfied with just oh, by the way, I'm not satisfied with the Netflix approach, right? Like Netflix, I kind of know stuff is going to show up there and I don't really have to be wrapped around the axle, right? And I used to look at the Netflix, hey, here's everything that's coming this month, here's everything that's leaving, right? I don't really feel I have to do that. Now, I don't feel I have to do that partially because I also have Hulu and Amazon Prime and Disney Plus. But, Disney Plus, before I went down that path, because I'm not a big Disney Plus animated guy, right? It was the promise of, hey, we're going to get MCU movies in, right, at some time. And I know that, again, it's not a perfect analogy, but one thing I will say, again, if you want to kind of look at a business that is doing a thing which is complementary to instilling confidence, is there's an entire roadmap by phase, right? And I know a lot of people don't like that, but great Scott, I got to give Feige credit for the fact that he has a roadmap of product delivery for several years out that tell people what they can expect.
Yeah, and I don't feel like we have that with Microsoft right now. I don't feel like we have that roadmap. We do with Sony. Again, people say, "Oh, well, Wolverine, you don't know when that's coming out." Yeah, but it's something, right? It's something. We have KOTOR, the remake. We have, some of the other stuff that Sony's talked about. there's a tangible difference there, I think, in how they've laid out the roadmap versus Microsoft. And then I also think there's an optics issue here with them, is that, now we're 2022, potentially no exclusives, and then people think about, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? Halo Infinite, its development problems. We know about, Halo Infinite right now. Again, you and I are playing Halo Infinite, but we also recognize the fact that not a lot of other people are playing, at least according to Steam, where Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition has more, I think, players, right, than Halo Infinite. Is that I think you pulled that up when I were on. But I think it's an issue of optics for them, and maybe that goes back to your point about what is it you said about was it consumer confidence?
Consumer confidence, lack of uncertainty.
But the optics right there. I mean, we're seeing it right now, right? That uncertainty. I have it. Other people have it in the community. It kind of started with Halo Infinite. And then now 2022, it's like potentially they don't have any big titles, and it's like they're not going to have any big titles 2022. Maybe Forza, the new Forza Motorsport, but from what I'm hearing, a Gears of War 2 remaster, and some other smaller titles that'll be in Game Pass.
And Forza Motorsport, I mean, everybody keeps pointing that. Even I point to it. Again, huge Forza Motorsport fan, huge Forza Horizon fan. I've played every single one, right, since the Xbox One era, right? Highly look forward to that. Personally, enjoy that series far more than the Gran Turismo series, right? But to my recollection, does Forza Motorsport have a declared release date, or have they just said?
It does not. It does not. But there's this. There's been some rumors out there that it could drop this year, but nothing officially is going to be announced.
Right, and I'll go back to the COVID statement, and again, full on sympathy, full on understanding, full on empathy for what that did to development activities where people don't work remote. Look,
But developers did release games during COVID.
Right. Yeah. I was just saying, look, a very, very, very large part of my daily duties is software estimates for software development. And I just live in a world where I punch those numbers like every single day and manage roadmaps and manage release schedules. So I will definitely be the first one to say that, yes, when you have an expectation in a development pipeline that there's going to be a certain amount of collaboration which directly feeds your team's velocity right in a sprint, and that moving everyone remotely and the way that impacted your tooling and whether or not your corporation's IT infrastructure and ability for people remote, like, I get it. Like, I took a knockoff on my efficiency for all of my development activities during that time because I expected that it was going to have an impact. I identified that as a risk. I also identified opportunities where I felt we would be able to recover for those, right? But regardless, I guess the thing I have to say of now, that's my perspective from being somebody who's deeply ingrained in software development, right, in their professional life. The vast majority of your consumer base is not, right? Yeah. And so what are they going to look at? Kind of what you just said, BRAP. They're going to say, hey, I'm not going to say no first-party titles were delivered in 2020, 2021, 2022 for Xbox, but when I compare the ones that were to Ghost of Tsushima, Marvel, Miles Morales, multiple iterations of MLB The Show, The Last of Us Part 2, director's cuts, Gran Turismo 7, Horizon Forbidden West, and I have this discussion with teams in my own business. Like you can put all the emotion and all the subjectivity around it you want, but when customers look at delivery performance over a year, the only thing that they look at is they look at the stack of stuff that you delivered, right? And if they're looking at two corporations, they're going to look at the stack of stuff that one company delivered versus the stack of stuff that the other one delivered. That's not subjective. That's objective, tangible evidence, and that's an enumeration that they can quantify, right?
Well, but you're asking people to think, to actually think, or to use facts, which isn't going to happen in the gaming space. But I'm sorry, go ahead, man.
Yeah, no. That's all I was going to say. Can you decrypt this super chat because I'm not able to understand it?
Borbor Kotri, 2000 Super Chat, GT7 launched 2022. Forza Horizon 7 is F7 is non-issue. Market penetration. Borbor, God bless you. I don't know what you're saying, but thank you for the super chat.
I think what he's saying is Gran Turismo 7 has already launched, so I guess nobody's going to care about Forza Motorsport. I think it's actually Forza Motorsport 8. I think
it's 8. Yeah, I don't know about. I don't agree, Borbor, that no one's going to care about Forza. But that's that's kind of my point. Like it's the optics. It's we have tangible. You can see the release cadence, right? You can see the games that have come out. Whether really people go, oh well, they're still doing cross-gen on PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5. That it doesn't matter, right? Because those are still games that are coming out for the Sony platform. And there's a lot of them. Whether it's director cuts, like you said, or it's a Miles Morales, or it's a Returnal, or it's a Demon Souls remake, or it's something else, right? Or if it's Forspoken, they got that third-party deal with Square Enix, or if it's a KOTOR remake, it hasn't come out yet, but you know what? It's okay. Wait, they got all these other games. They got the Spider-Mans. They got that have released. They have the Ghost of Tsushima DLC director's cut. They have Returnal. They have all these other games. Ratchet and Clank just came out, and now what? Well, they got KOTOR. I mean, like perception. I mean, like it's the optics of it.
Right. So, and I really like this comment and question in the chat from Josh Ayers. Do they maybe think just saying it's coming as a roadmap, or are dates a roadmap? So I will say it again from the software domain. To me, dates are a roadmap. When I tell my customers that I'm giving them a roadmap, I don't. So there's two different things that I say that I think that highlight the delta between these things. When I say to customers that I have a product that does 2 major releases per year and 2 kind of service packs, or like minor updates per year, so 2 majors and 2 minors, I don't call that a roadmap, right? When I tell customers that I have a roadmap, and I have different customers, I have some that need a roadmap or want a roadmap. I have some customers where it's the most prudent thing for me from a business perspective to give them a roadmap. That is a thing that has planned releases with actually features aligned to them, right? So to me, in terms of the gaming space, it's telling me I'll stop short of just calling it a quarterly tighten up of when to expect it. Maybe I'll even give it a half year, right? Let's just make it really loose for anybody who's seriously feels abused by this Xbox conversation. Let's call it a half year, right? So that to me in a gaming space would be something that would be advertised to me that told me games that were coming out within at least within a half year bucket, right? With enough information conveyed to me that at least let me know kind of what genre they were in, right? And hopefully maybe a title. I would even be fine. Like, and again, this is a matter of, from a business assessment perspective, this is a matter of saying, here's a product that I don't know has all the appeal that it needs to have to customers, and this is what I'm going to do to like return to green and kind of fix that problem. I would even say, you could even generically label them, right? Just say, shooter, first half 23, right? Or, AAA, AA, whatever, right? Just to start giving people some semblance of, what's coming down the pike and why they should pay for Game Pass, and where there's going to be value added. The other thing I would say, Josh, is, and this is one thing I've said too, is, for all of these years, I've never really understood it. When E3, Summer Game Fest, whatever it's been over the last few years, like summertime announcements from the major platforms. For the last few years, people have said, oh, well, I really like the Sony one, or Sony won E3. And I just always kind of looked at it and I was like, what the hell are you guys talking about? And I think, BRAP, you guys were having a discussion with this on Crossfire, and somebody who I think kind of didn't understand the assignment said, oh, well, Sony, always tells us when games are coming out. And I'm like, The Last of Us 2 was announced in 2016.
Yes, Sony doesn't always tell us that.
That game didn't come out for 4 years, right? Yeah, and we saw it multiple times at E3. Yeah. I'm like, Ghost of Tsushima was announced, I think, in 2017.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, come on. I mean, so my recollection of history is when I look at those summertime shows, and we in on my podcast, we actually like keep a spreadsheet where we actually mark all these things down. So I think my recollection is, pretty decent. Each of those years, from, across the Xbox One era, I would say, the Xbox shows tended to have more release dates in them, whereas the Sony ones were always kind of calendar year release dates, right? And many of them didn't have release dates.
Yeah.
So Josh, kind of the other part of my answer to your question, I'm going to watch what happens this summer, right? And if this 612 show comes around and it kind of feels like a Sony PlayStation show, and it just says calendar year or doesn't even say when the date's coming out, again, that's going to inspire me to less confidence than if Sony takes the stage whenever they do this summer, and they're at least able to advertise when they project those games are going to be released with a higher degree of specificity than what Xbox does. That's going to be the most interesting comparison to me over the next few months.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. Yeah. Game Lodge, look, man, I told you I was going to keep you on here for like an hour. So we're at the hour point, and I'm not going to lie to you, man. I actually want to play a little King of the Hill. So I don't know if you're up for it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, unquestionably, that was already on my slate for tonight. so look, guys, here we are indicating that we've got some questions to ask about Xbox, and I think it's always fine to ask questions. This is my biggest problem with the gaming community and the gaming dialogue.
By the way, real quick, Game Logic. No one's going to understand. They're going to listen to this and be like, two things are going to happen. They go, "Oh, these guys are frauds because they're playing Halo Infinite still, right?" And two, you're going to have people that get it, that understand that, hey, you know what? I can ask questions of things that I'm actively participating in. That's actually healthy to do, right?
Right.
Like as a consumer, you can absolutely ask questions.
Right. Look, Halo Infinite has problems. When you're on the battlefield, it's great. When you're off the battlefield, it has problems. That doesn't mean that I'm not encouraged to play it because it feels great when you're on the battlefield.
Yeah,
right? It's okay to have differences of opinion about pieces of things.
Absolutely. Yeah. The problem is it's all or nothing, and that's the problem.
Right. It's very binary. It's very binary.
It really is. Yeah. So we got one more super chat here from Navigator 32221. The $5 super chat. Thank you for that. It says, what's the point of announcing a roadmap when fans have zero faith they will hit those dates? So are you saying like Xbox fans?
No, I kind of.
I guess I don't know.
I kind of see his point. Like, I actually, a member of my podcast, we have this discussion every year too, or have this discussion every time something bad happens. I always say, when something bad happens, if a company has like a major public showing keynote or whatever, that they should own that mistake and they should apologize. Right. I will be bothered if Xbox takes the stage on 612 and doesn't say anything about the fact that they just had a big, network service, whatever kerfuffle that caused the problem.
They're not going to do that. They're not. I don't think they're going to
do that. And I think they're very good about that. Mm-hmm. But when EA has messed something up and Activision has messed up something, I always say, well, do you think they're going to apologize? And he always says, nope, I don't think they're going to apologize. And, big business issue. Like, I feel like they should. So I get it, right? It's this question of, well, should a company take kind of corrective action in its messaging if it's not really going to make a difference? And again, this is just an instance where I'm not going to speak for the entire market, but I'm going to speak from somebody who, again, is in the technical industry, software development, right? For me as a consumer, if you don't put something out that tells me you're correct, we talk about this in agile software development all the time, right? The big thing about agile software development is it's a partially a forcing action to make individual contributors and members of a software development team to make commitments to their teammates of the things that they're going to deliver within a development increment, right? That's the kind of way I advertise it to my agile teams, right? This is your covenant, right? This is the commitment you're making. And I understand like his mother, my dog, their brother, our car kind of stuff comes up, but if you're supposed to deliver something in a sprint, you're supposed to go do what you need to do to deliver something in a sprint. So my feeling is without conveying some semblance of a roadmap, and I've given a incredibly wide swath of latitude on like what my expectations would be, but without doing something that sounds to me like a commitment and rings in my ear as a commitment, then again, I walk away just feeling like I don't know what the hell they're doing, right? And if somebody comes to me and asks me a question, that's what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna say, it's a great platform. It's a good piece of hardware. What they're doing from a software perspective, I just couldn't tell you.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. And by the way, that would apply to the other companies that are involved in gaming, right? Like Sony, Nintendo, right?
Yeah, I say this about Nintendo all the time. About
I'm only saying that because someone's gonna be like, "Oh, you're picking on Xbox." That's why I bring it. As crazy as it is, I just wanted to clarify it because people will take that as you're being, it's ridiculous. It's like, no, I got what you were saying, but people, yeah. Anyhow, all right. So look, Game Logic, I do want to get on some King of the Hill. I do need to take a quick break though before I hop on King of the Hill. But no, man, I want to say thank you, man, for hopping on and kind of just talking this out, because there's been some interesting takes out there about the delays and everything, and I've found that you are probably the most level-headed individual on Twitter right now. So
right, yeah. At least I try and I mean I don't know that I do a perfect job, but I will at least try and own up to and admit when I'm making an emotional statement and talking about myself as a consumer versus when I'm making a more logic data driven statement talking about myself from a business assessment perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, no, I certainly appreciate that, man. But, all right, everyone. Big shout out to everyone in the live chat that hung out with us this evening. Really appreciate it. Please hit that like button. Appreciate the super chats as well from Borbor Country and Navigator3221. And, look, if you're new, subscribe, hit the bell notifications so you're alerted when we go live. And we'll be back on Wednesday. We'll be back Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for another episode of BRAP. I don't know. Hopefully there's some news to talk about, because I have a feeling things are going to be kind of slow from a news perspective. I say that now, but watch something happen on Monday or Tuesday this week. So, but we'll see.
Watch something blow up.
Something might happen. Something might happen. So, but no, Game Logic, man. Thank you. It's a pleasure as always, man. And looking forward to playing some King of the Hill, man. I don't know, man. Like we were doing Team Slayer for a long time, and you tried King of the Hill last night. I'm like, man, I kind of like this. I like King of the Hill.
Yeah, it's all about competition, man. It gets that blood flowing. That's always a good thing.
Yeah, I get a little. Yeah, I get. Yeah. So look at Erotimus. Remember, there's no BRAP rant without Xbox. Look, hey, Erotimus. If I'll leave this last thought with you, sir. If Xbox was delivering the goods to me, there wouldn't be any BRAP rants about Xbox. So I'll just leave it at that. So you won't hear me ranting about PC, because PC, again, is the best platform to play video games. So on that note, you know how to throw in a PC plug there. No, but great to see you, Rodimus. Thank you, man. Appreciate you coming by. But no, King of the Hill, man. Like I feel like I get more of the competitive like juices going in, I think, in King of the Hill than I do Team Slayer. I don't know why, but I do. So, anyway.
It's lots of kills, man. Lots of kills. I think part of it is there's a big chunk of time that you don't have to run around and look for everybody because they're sitting on the control point.
Yeah, and actually, I feel like even if you're not playing with people in the same chat or the same team, everyone's running to the same objective, where everyone's kind of like playing Team Slayer. Sometimes people are just kind of just like, doing their own thing, right? So,
right.
Yeah, you can't do that against the sweaties. So, all right, everyone, we're out. Thank you again for watching this episode or this BRAP rant. Really appreciate it as always. And remember, we'll be live again Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So, everyone, enjoy your Sunday night. We'll see you then.